On January 15, 2026, the Middle East stands on the edge of a major conflict. Tensions are at a breaking point, with the world watching anxiously as events unfold hour by hour. The region's fragile peace hangs in the balance, and every decision made now could have consequences for generations to come. Key Arab Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Qatar, are urgently warning the U.S., do not strike Iran. In a rare show of unity, these nations are reaching out to Washington, emphasizing the grave risks of military escalation. Their leaders are making direct appeals both publicly and behind closed doors, hoping to prevent a catastrophe. These longtime American allies fear a U.S. attack would ignite a regional firestorm, threatening their own security and global stability. The Gulf's vital oil infrastructure, bustling ports, and financial markets could all become targets overnight, sending shockwaves through the global economy. Gulf leaders argue that military intervention could unleash chaos, provoke Iranian retaliation, and destabilize the region for years. They warn that the aftermath could see border clashes, terror attacks, and a surge in refugees, overwhelming their societies and straining resources. Their warning isn't support for Iran's regime, but a plea for survival and regional stability. They stress that their call for restraint is rooted in the desire to protect their people and preserve the delicate balance that has kept the region from descending into chaos. Despite these concerns, the White House signals that President Trump alone will decide, with public messages hinting at imminent action. The administration's rhetoric grows sharper and the world holds its breath, uncertain whether diplomacy or force will prevail. The Gulf states' proximity to Iran makes them especially vulnerable to any fallout. Their cities, economies, and citizens are just across the water from potential conflict zones, and even a limited strike could have devastating effects on daily life. They urge Washington to consider the unpredictable consequences of war, warning that a failed state next door is far worse than the current tense status quo. The specter of civil unrest, humanitarian crises, and extremist groups filling a power vacuum looms large in their calculations. Their message is clear: allow for gradual internal reform, not sudden violent regime change. The Gulf states hope that patience and diplomacy can avert disaster, preserving hope for a more stable future in a region all too familiar with the costs of war. The Gulf states' anxiety is rooted in the economic risks of war. For decades, these nations have built their fortunes on the stability of energy markets, and any disruption threatens not just their own prosperity, but the financial well-being of millions around the world. Their prosperity depends on oil and gas exports. Any conflict could devastate their economies and the global market. The Gulf supplies nearly a third of the world's oil, and its natural gas is vital for power generation from Asia to Europe. Even a brief interruption could send shockwaves through industries, from manufacturing to transportation, and impact everyday life far beyond the region. A U.S. strike would likely trigger Iranian retaliation against vital oil infrastructure and shipping lanes, threatening the world's energy supply. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway, is the world's most important oil choke point. Any attack here could block the passage of millions of barrels a day, causing immediate shortages and panic in global markets. Even the threat of war has rattled markets. Actual conflict would send oil prices soaring and halt investment. Investors already wary would pull back from the region, and the uncertainty would ripple through stock exchanges from Tokyo to London to New York. Financial hubs like Dubai and Doha could see capital flight and economic paralysis. The luxury malls and gleaming towers that symbolize Gulf prosperity could quickly empty as businesses shutter and foreign investors seek safer havens. The Gulf's economies are deeply tied to global financial systems. A crisis here would send shockwaves worldwide. Banks, investment funds, and multinational corporations all have stakes in the region, making its stability a matter of global concern. A sudden oil supply halt could spark inflation, disrupt supply chains, and tip the world into recession. Everyday goods could become more expensive, and shortages could appear in unexpected places, from gas stations to grocery stores. Gulf leaders have told both Washington and Tehran they won't participate in conflict or allow their airspace to be used for attacks. They are urging restraint, emphasizing that their countries want to remain neutral and keep vital trade routes open. Their plea: the economic cost of war is too high for anyone to bear. Economists warn that a prolonged conflict could undo years of progress, leading to job losses, business closures, and hardship for ordinary people across the globe. Stability in the Gulf is essential for global prosperity. The world is watching, hoping that diplomacy prevails and the engines of commerce keep running. for the sake of all our futures. At the heart of these fears is the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most critical energy choke point. 20% of global oil passes through this narrow waterway daily. Iran's proximity gives it the power to disrupt or close the strait in a conflict, using mines or missiles. Even a partial closure would send shipping and insurance costs skyrocketing, crippling Gulf economies and global energy supplies. Oil prices would surge, hitting consumers and industries worldwide. The economic shock could trigger a global recession. Gulf leaders see this as an existential threat, making de-escalation vital. The region's lifeline could become a battleground overnight. Inside Iran, unrest has reached a boiling point. Since late December 2025, protests over economic hardship have exploded into a nationwide movement for political change. The government's response has been brutal. Thousands killed, cities locked down, and communications cut. Human rights groups report staggering casualties, while the regime tries to crush dissent in darkness. The U.S. sees an opportunity to support change, but Gulf states warn that outside intervention could backfire. A U.S. strike might unite Iranians against a foreign enemy, undermining the protesters' cause. The risk military action could strengthen hardliners and worsen suffering. Iran's internal crisis is complex. Outside force could have tragic unintended consequences. Military tensions are escalating fast. With each passing day, the U.S. insists it has the assets to strike Iran if ordered, even without a carrier nearby. Evacuations of non-essential U.S. personnel from Qatar signal serious preparations. Every military move is scrutinized as a possible prelude to war. Israel, a key U.S. ally, is on high alert, coordinating closely with Washington. These actions suggest contingency plans are in motion across the region. For Gulf states, caught between rivals, the threat is immediate. Their lands could become the battlefield. Their urgent calls for restraint are a last effort to prevent a war with no clear end in sight. The U.S.-Iran crisis is playing out on a global stage. European allies, wary of war, push for diplomacy and fear destabilization. China and Russia, with deep ties to Iran, oppose U.S. military action and seek to protect their interests. China relies on Iranian oil. Russia values its regional partnership. A U.S. strike could isolate Washington diplomatically, drawing condemnation and weakening its global influence. The crisis comes as the U.S. faces rivalries with China and Russia and other foreign policy challenges. War in the Middle East could stretch American resources and embolden adversaries elsewhere. The lack of a unified coalition leaves the U.S. in a precarious position, making this a test of both power and alliances. The Gulf states' warnings highlight the immense stakes of peace in the Middle East. This region, long at the crossroads of history, is once again at a pivotal moment. The choices made here will echo far beyond its borders, shaping the future for millions. A conflict here would ripple across the globe, threatening economies and lives far beyond the region. The Gulf's energy resources fuel industries and homes worldwide, and any disruption could send shockwaves through global markets, affecting everything from fuel prices to food security. Gulf leaders know firsthand how fragile stability is and how devastating war could be. Their experience with past conflicts has taught them that peace is not guaranteed, and that the cost of violence is always higher than expected. While Iran's human rights abuses are grave, war risks even greater suffering and chaos. Civilian lives are always the first to be shattered, and the humanitarian consequences could be catastrophic, with families displaced and entire communities torn apart. The Gulf message is clear. The risks of military action far outweigh any potential gains. Dialogue and negotiation, though challenging, remain the only viable path to lasting security and prosperity for all. Diplomacy, though slow, offers a path to de-escalation and hope. It requires patience, compromise, and courage from all sides, but it is the only way to prevent further tragedy and build a foundation for peace. The world has a collective interest in dialogue, not war. Every nation, whether near or far, has a stake in ensuring that this region remains stable, and that its people can look forward to a future free from fear. The coming hours are critical. Restraint is essential. Decisions made now will determine whether the region moves toward peace or plunges into deeper turmoil. True leadership means choosing stability and peace over reckless action. It means putting the well-being of people above politics and having the wisdom to seek solutions, not escalation. The stakes are simply too high for any other course. In this moment, the world watches and hopes that reason, dialogue, and diplomacy will prevail.